going to be using just simple tools for this. I have a set of drawing pencils of varying degrees of hardness, and the pencils I'm using are actually Caran d'Ache graph wood, and I like these because they're the pencil color itself tells you what hardness or how dark or light the lead is, which is really nice, so you don't have to like read the little numbers and look through things. You can just grab the one you want. Then I also have a blending stump, and I have a kneaded eraser, pencil sharpener, and I like this pencil type eraser by Faber-Castell that you can actually sharpen the tip of, and you can use the brush to whisk away. It's like the old typewriter erasers, but it's nice because you don't smudge up your work if you have to erase something, and you can get into a nice detailed area with the sharpened tip. So I'm going to put these off to the side. And the first thing that I do is I lay the stencil on the paper, and I'm using just some drawing paper, just, you know, kind of student grade drawing paper, nothing real fancy because we're just practicing. And I'll take a light pencil, and this one is actually a 4H, so it's fairly hard. And it will give a nice light line. And all I do is simply go through and I will trace around on the stencil. And you can honestly just put this in a groove and just go slowly and go around, and it goes through all of the little openings. It just skips right over the bumps in the stencil, works really easily. And I will go through and trace the whole face onto the paper. You can see the graphite is fairly light on here. I always like to start out light and work up. And so I will just start with using the same pencil I used to trace the design, the 4H, and start to establish areas that I know need to be shaded. I always suggest to people to start under the chin, because that area you know is going to be fairly dark. And you can kind of test out how your pencils are working on the paper here. I'm going to grab just a little darker one here just so it shows that better on camera what I'm doing. So when you start under the chin, I like to lay a line going in one direction, and then I like to come back in the other direction, so you're doing a crosshatch type shading with the pencil. And I just like the look of the cross hatching. So that's mainly how I shade. Sometimes I'll go back in and soften it up with a blending stump, or soften certain areas with a blending stump later. And with this technique, you can go back in over the top and build up layers of darkness. And it has a little texture to it, which I find attractive in sketching. So the other area, I'm just going to kind of work my way up the face here, would be underneath her lip. And a real easy way to do this is make a sideways C. It's just a little bump there that mimics the line of the lip. You're just going to go the opposite way underneath. And once you get that established, then you're going to just lay down a little shading under that lip that follows the contour of the lip and just goes out to that little bump. And this is going to form the chin here. You kind of think of a face in layers of, in planes. And this is a plane, the chin is a plane that will stick out higher than the face around it, just slightly. And so to make that pop out, you have to add some shading around it to make it pop out. The lip is also on a higher plane than this underneath, which is why we're shading right underneath the lip. The upper lip is always darker than the lower lip because there's a shadow that is created by the angle of the upper lip, because it's got a highlight on the top of it, and then it angles back in, and that creates a dark shadow underneath it that you want to make sure that you emphasize. So the bottom lip always has a nice highlight right in the middle that I don't color with the pencil at all. And then underneath the nose you have that nice little area that forms that little pouty lip. And that gets a little shading, but you don't want to go too dark there either, because then you end up, it looks like they have a little mustache there, and you want to avoid that. We're just doing some very light shading right now, just establishing where we're going to shade. Now the nose, like I told you right here, I kind of envision a circle here. I do the same for the nose, and I kind of gave you a little start to the circle on the template. I don't draw a complete circle in there, it's just a little bit, so I know to shade underneath this and just a little bit on top of it to help the ball of the nose pop out. And then as we work our way up, we're going to establish the sides of the nose as well. But before I do that, I'm going to go up to the eye area. One of the darker areas on the face is right in this inside corner of the eye. And just like we made a little, like a C laying on its side here, we're going to do a C up here too. And I do the same kind of cross hatching motion with my pencil. And you can see I'm holding my pencil very loosely. When you're shading, don't get all down like this, because you're going to make dark lines and dents in your paper that you can't overcome when you're trying to shade. So I'm just holding it very loosely, doing a little C on both sides to establish the eye socket. The eye is actually a round orb set into the face. That's where you get the eyelid from, the little crease underneath the eye. It's actually a big old circle there, big old eyeball. And these things cover it and make the eye look not completely round, but it is a round circle set into your face, a ball set into your face. So I'm going to go in here and do a little there. And then to establish the nose, I don't want a harsh line coming down the face, because this is a front-on view. If she was turned slightly to the side, yeah, you'd want a little line on one side to make one side darker than the other, but imagine the light's coming, you know, pretty much directly on here. We're going to, maybe a little from this angle. I kind of like to establish somewhat of an angle, but maybe picture the light being up here coming down. I'm going to go gently down to this little nostril here, kind of like just make a little top to the nostril so I don't shade all the way down there. And then you have this line here that connects the inner corner of the eye with the outer nostril. That's one of the guidelines of the face. It's a general rule. You can bend all these rules, but it's really good to learn the general proportions of a face and then bend them, rather than doing something that looks, you know, just drawing a face and putting things wherever you want. You can end up with a face that you don't really understand what's not working about it. And it's probably because there was a rule of drawing the face that you didn't follow, and you didn't bend it in the right way that made it aesthetically pleasing. So you can get a wonky looking face if you go too far outside the rules or you don't understand the rules. That's why I think it's really important to practice drawing a correct face before you start messing with cutesy faces or stylized faces that where you put the eyes really far apart, or you do something odd and you don't really know why it's not quite working. If you have a good foundation, you can always build from that and go out from that and explore from that. So it's really good to start with a foundation of knowing where things actually go. And you can see from the guidelines too, like the eyes are halfway down the face, and then you divide that and the chin in half. There's your nose, and you divide that nose line and the chin in half, and there's where your mouth is going to go in that little box. And everything lines up. You divide this in half this way, and there's your eye. You should be able to fit 5 eye widths across the face. So there should be enough room in here to put another eye, and same over here in general. When we go to refine this at the end, of course, we're going to be putting hair and things, and then that's when that part gets covered up. But in general, that's the rules of drawing a face. So we have some shading established going on. I'm going to shade a little bit under the eye and kind of connect this little lower eye crease that happens from that, remember the ball of the eye in there? It makes this little crease here. Kind of connect that up there just a little. You don't need to lay on a lot of graphite for that. And then I'm going to go up to the temple area. There's also a plane of the face up here that happens right in the middle where the forehead sticks out the most. And then you get some shading going off to the sides here. In the temple, the eyebrow bone actually sticks out farther on the head. So there's a little shading that happens right above that is good to put in there. It helps make everything look a little more realistic. So I add a little bit, I'm just laying some down, laying graphite down, doing a little cross hatching here. And then I'm going to, because her face look is starting to pop out in different areas, but look right around the edge of the face, it's all flat. We don't want her to be flat. Her face is rounded. But some people make the mistake when they shade around the face to go all the way to that pencil line, and that's not correct. There's a highlight that happens. It's a reflective highlight that happens right around the chin line and the jaw line. So when you shade around the face to help it be round, don't go all the way to that line. Just leave a little bit of that line showing, and I go all the way down till I connect with this chin area here, leaving my chin white. And see where this little box kind of happens here? You want to shade that in a little bit, because what that does is form this, yet again, other circle, which is your cheekbone. So when you're shading underneath, this just happens, the guidelines happen to form a nice little place that shows you, yeah, shade in there, inside that little box, and connect all of it. And then same with over here. I'm going to connect it into that little box, continue around the face. When you get to the neck area, the little hollow in your throat down here, I like to start about where these two lines are, right underneath that, and go down. And you can either draw these lines in and leave them because that forms a column of the throat, or not. But then down here, I add just a little half round of shading that is that little area where your collarbone sits. And see how it all like nicely comes together now. You've got some shading started, and then I just progressively get darker using darker and darker pencils to help with the shading. So I'm going to go through and I would do the same cross hatching and establish darker areas. Darker under the chin, darker under the lip, and you don't have to cover every area that you already added some graphite to. Not every area is going to get this extra darker colors. As you build up, you use less and less of the darker colors, darker leads, as you build up around your face. You're going to use less and less, because you'll end up with a really, really dark face if you don't. So, and you want the tones. You want the different tones of the skin coming through. You want the highlights and the different tones of gray. So you use less and less of each dark color as you get progressively darker, smaller and smaller amounts, and you work until you build up some nice shaded areas. And then for the ears, sometimes I leave the ears just like this if I know I'm going to put hair over them. Or if I'm not sure yet, then I'll just, for practice, add some shading into the ear. I just kind of make a little spot where the little outer crease of the ear is there, and go down here and add a little round spot where, you know, they're really pretty easy from this angle. There's not a lot you can do. So I just add a little bit in there. Okay, and then so you keep shading and keep adding darker and darker. I've gone in and done her eyes. I go darker around the outside, color a little pupil in there, not a complete circle. Leave a little bit of white in there for the reflection. And remember I said before, I'm pretending that my light source is up here and coming down, so that little reflection is on the same spot on each eye. The light's hitting it from right here. You don't want the reflection to be on this side of the eye over here and on the opposite side over here. I see that done quite often, and it's wrong. It makes them look cross-eyed, and sometimes you don't catch why the eyes look wonky. That's why. It's not the correct placement for that highlight. It needs to be on the exact same place on both eyes. So you just refine by adding shading and light touches of it until you get it the way you like it. If you want to go in with a blending stump, after you've laid down the graphite, you could just take a blending stump and gently blend out some of that shading, the cross hatching that you did. Like I said, sometimes I leave it just cross hatching. It just depends on what I feel like doing, because sometimes I just like that look of the cross hatch, and I won't blend all of it out either, because I like the sketchy look of having some of that cross hatching show up. But anyway, you just go around and blend it with the blending stump, which really softens the whole thing. You go around and work your way around. And now you can start to see the highlight that happened. I kind of round out areas too, like under here where we shaded in that box, kind of make that go around a little bit. Once you get a little graphite on your blending stump, it goes a long ways, so you can kind of play. You don't have to keep adding more graphite. It helps you move it around because it's already on there. And I like to shade under the nose just with the graphite that's on the blending stump, just a little, because I don't want it overly dark, but I want those nostrils to pop out. And I also want this area here to have two little definite white lines there and a little white around the lips, because that's a highlight. That lip is coming out from the face, so you want a little white highlight all the way around the top and on those two little spots there under the nose. And then you can also shade just delicately around each side of the nostril, leaving a highlight in the middle of the nostril. And to add a little bit right here where the nose dips in a little bit before it comes back out where the brow bones start up here. It's all just in, kind of playing with the face. You just learn as you go. And the more you practice, the easier it gets to know where these highlights happen. And look at your own face, or look at your, husband's face or your child's face when they're sleeping or something. Look and see where those highlights happen. Around the face, and practice. You don't get good doing something one time. You get good doing something many, many times. And the reason I developed these stencils is to make it easy to practice all of this without having to do a complete new sketch every time, because I find that the faster, the more repetition, the better you get faster. So if you struggle over one portrait and it takes you a week to do one, you haven't really learned a lot. But if you've done 10 portraits that week, you've taught your muscles memory, and you've taught them how to keep, how to do something over and over and over again, and it remembers. Your hand remembers, your brain remembers. I'm going to slide this over and show you the other side. This face was actually was done with the side of the stencil that had no details on it. And what's fun about that is you can change them up a little bit and create a different look. You can make the eyes a little bigger. You can make the nose a little wider, the mouth a little smaller, whatever you want to do. But you can change it up a bit and create the face the way that you want it. The other thing that I wanted to show you is you can see on this one, the face is oval, very oval, egg-shaped. When you get to this point and you want to go in and you start adding the hair, you're going to want to change that shape up. That shape is just a basis to get you started. It's not the shape of a real face. A real face has it goes indented right by the eyes here. You have a nice square back of your jaw that comes forward. Your jawline down here straightens out a bit. It's wider here, straightens out a bit as it comes forward. Like I said, goes in here. So you start to change all of those things on your drawing just by shading, just by taking your pencil and indenting a little bit and straightening lines out and bringing the shading up. You can change it really quickly. and give it shape and definition and not have such a little egghead. This top line here is kind of a general hairline. You don't need to make hair way above the top of the head here. That's really where the hair is going to end. The hair is going to, you're going to have bangs and things that go on in this part, and the top of the hair is actually up here. Your hair doesn't, unless you have 80s hair, and which, by all means, draw the 80s hair. But the hair really just happens right between this and the top of the head, with just going a little bit above the top of the head. You don't need to get real tall up there, or you could end up with a odd looking, deal going on there. So anyway, you can see here, I added some hair loosely, just not real detailed or anything. I left all of my guidelines on here because these are practice, and I like the look of the guidelines on there. A lot of times in my art journals and things, you'll see all the guidelines on my sketches, and a lot of times too, I would take like this whole thing and maybe I would scan it and print it off in different sizes and use those as collage bases in my journal. So it's my own sketches, and then I copy them off and use them as a base for an art journal page, and then I might add color to them or paint on them or do something else to them. But these aren't just like throwaway sketches. You can reuse them for other things. And if you really wanted to go in there and get rid of those lines, if you did a sketch you were just really proud of and you want to go get rid of the lines, then you just take an eraser or a kneaded eraser and go in and erase those and brush them off, and they're gone. That's why you go with a really light pencil when you do the lines, so that you have that option later to erase them. So anyway, there's my little tutorial of how to use my face stencils. You can see on here, this was the starting of drawing the one without the details. So that's what this is right here. This is me drawing the details in and doing it. And then these are using this one and this one I used with the ones that had the details already on the stencil. So kind of fun, lots of fun to play with, a good way to practice your shading, practice where the elements of their face go, the details, and have a lot of fun. Thanks for watching.